Hello and welcome to GiBi's Horror Homestead. This is episode 3 of FNAF Q&A. Don't really have a better title for it yet, but basically I'm going to be answering the questions that you guys have been leaving in my comments. These are not necessarily the most asked questions. These aren't necessarily the best questions. These are just the questions that I saw, that I skimmed, and I said, I want to answer that in a video. Joining me is Toy Freddy. We're going to need a more official channel name for him, so leave your ideas for what we're going to call him in the comments. Question 1. What is your opinion on dual process theory about Cassidy being Crying Child's name? Dual process theory is a channel that's exploded in the last couple weeks. They have a very long video about how they solved FNAF. You may have seen it yourself. It has many, many views, or you may have seen Matt Pat reacting to it. I've talked about it. I've seen other people talking about it on Twitter. ID's Fantasies talked about it on Twitter. Sire Squawks talked about it in a live stream. And it very much comes down to my opinion that the more people who are putting out ideas in the community, specifically in video format on YouTube, the better. Every time someone leaves a good comment in my comment section with a theory or interpretation, I'm just like, I hope this guy makes a video about that. I want to see that in video form. I want to see their entire thing broken down step by step, their logic, their how this relates to this, how we got here, how the A to the lead to the B leads to the C leads to the Q all the way around. I love that video. I love that we have two people who clearly know what they're talking about, who are good at video editing, who are good at delivering audio into a video, who just made something that the community latched onto. It's great. I love the video. It's wrong. The problem with talking about a video that's basically 2 hours long and just saying it's wrong is that that's very dismissive of all the little pieces of information that they put together in very unique and interesting ways, and also the pieces of evidence that they found themselves that other people don't talk about. When when other bigger FNAF YouTubers kind of dismiss it and say it's wrong, what I'm talking about, and what I'm pretty sure they're talking about, is the notion that Cassidy's the Crying Child's name, and that Mike is the one you should not have killed. Those, which are basically their biggest conclusions within the video, are just so obviously wrong if you look at the source material. If you read the logbook, there is no real way to come away and think that the name Cassidy as put in the book is supposed to be the name of the crying child. The name Cassidy written on a gravestone, or the name Cassidy implied to be written on a gravestone because one of the pictures says, my name, is clearly answering who the final gravestone is in the FNAF 6 Pizzeria Simulator ending, where one of the names is kind of like crossed off. It's basically like you're watching a movie or a TV show, or you're playing a video game, and it's like, hey, you like this side character? Now you gotta go read a comic book about them if you want to get the full story. It's like cross-promotion. Scott left out one of the names in the video game so that people would go out and buy this book. And the book answers the question. It's a big puzzle. It's this fun, exciting thing. And it leads to one lingering question that didn't have to be a lingering question left in the games. It answers the question of who is that last gravestone. There is a very popular fan theory. It's called BV5th, which stands for Bite Victim, so the crying child is the 5th MCI victim. But it's just not true. BV5th isn't true. That gravestone Cassidy being the crying child's name isn't true. There is really no way in which the crying child in any of the FNAF mediums is also one of the MCI victims. If you look at the movie, the equivalent of Cassidy, the blonde Luke Skywalker kid who's in Golden Freddy, is not the same as Garrett, who is a stand-in for the crying child. Although also, you could kind of argue that Garrett's also a stand-in for Charlie, whatever. In the Silver Eyes novels, there is a girl named Cassidy who is one of the missing children, and she's a girl. There's just really... and I'm not saying that the books are in the timeline, or the movies in the timeline, obviously, or that we should look to these for one-to-one comparisons. But I think the biggest piece of evidence against that is a big piece of evidence that I use in my theory about who Cassidy is, which is that Scott made a Reddit post after we solved the logbook, saying that one of the movie scripts that he rejected was the Cassidy script, and that it would take place over the course of many decades, and it just got too confusing and in its own lore. If Cassidy is the crying child, if Cassidy is the movie equivalent of Garrett, then there's no reason that you couldn't tell basically the FNAF movie that we got, but from the perspective of Garrett. There's no reason that you couldn't tell the crying child's story in a movie or a trilogy of movies. There is no reason that that would be too complicated or take place over the course of too many decades. But if you're talking about a movie about the spirit of Golden Freddy, who many people also believe is the one you should not have killed, then yes, I can see why that would be complicated. By somebody who died and then goes on to possess Golden Freddy, and then in my opinion, in my take on the series, is also like communicating through via video games to Henry, and is the one playing all the mini games and is learning this lore, right? If you take the story of FNAF as the nighttime security guard, that's the movie they made, that's the Mike script. If you take the story of FNAF via all the mini games and the backstory and lore, that's an incomprehensible movie that takes place over the course of several decades that just like is more of a FNAF encyclopedia than a film, which is what Scott said about it. So I really think that the images depicted in the logbook being very clear references to the FNAF 6 Pizzeria Simulator gravestone ending, and also Scott's comments about the character whose name is Cassidy, very much exclude Cassidy from being the same character as the crying child. Similarly to Mike being the one you should not have killed, I know that they kind of argue in their video saying that Mike being sent down to the sister location bunker by William was him dying, and I'm sure that I only watched the video twice. I know that they address a lot of counterpoints, but just because you address something doesn't necessarily mean that you address it to the capacity that everybody will sort of agree with you, right? It doesn't mean that everybody who's going to watch is going to go, oh, well, they addressed that, so that means that they're right. The fact is that William did not kill Mike just because he sent him down there thinking he could or even wanted him to die. I think that calling that character the one you should not have killed would be too obfuscated of a hint by Scott. If this character is named in the game the one you should not have killed, I don't think Scott would have named Mike the one you should not have killed. Because of all the characters in the game who died, Mike is, in fact, not somebody who William killed. Of all the characters in the game who would have that kind of name, the one you should not have killed, Mike, whose name we know, and who is William's son, would not sort of refer to himself in the third person spectrally as the one you shouldn't have killed. You know, Jacko Chica says, like, greetings from the fire and the one you should not have killed. If it was Mike, she would have said, greetings from the fire and from your son, I hate you, Dad. I've seen a lot of people, and these comments are also on my videos, where people say, I've never played the games, but this is my canon timeline. And whenever I see that comment, I'm just like, that is not something to, like, as the creator of that video, it's not something to be proud of that somebody who doesn't know, who hasn't seen the evidence for themselves, is just kind of believing you, right? Like, I want pushback. I want people who know the source material better than me to comment on my theories. And so when a lot of people who don't play the games, haven't read the books, haven't looked through the security log themselves, right? Like, you can look on a PDF online of all the security log stuff. You can watch videos of people breaking down how to solve it. I bought the book, and I flipped through every individual page, and I'm like, this is the page we found this thing on. This is the page we found this thing on. And I solved it myself. Obviously, it had already been solved. But I went through and did the steps myself to see, maybe there's a weird break in the logic. And I noticed how the last coordinate that we need to solve Cassidy's name was technically written in by Mike. It's not in the book itself. It's Mike's red pen writing at 8 p.m., whatever a.m. this happened. And I always thought that was weird. But the fact that the puzzle so clearly spells out Cassidy's name, and that otherwise this Mike's pen writing has no meaning, that is clearly the intended solution, even if I don't think that was necessarily the best puzzle design. But so many people watching the video, watching the dual process video, and saying, like, I agree, when they haven't done the legwork, is not necessarily something that you would want as a theorist. And so many other theorists, again, ID's Fantasy and Cyrus Squawks has specifically commented on it, basically being like, no, that's not just people who are so entrenched in their own ideas, who are like so built in, and they're like, oh my god, I can't even fathom changing my mind on this, I'm stubborn. That's just people who know what they're talking about saying, I've looked at the evidence myself, and this is just not true. So I've had a lot of people who want me to react to that video, to go through and to bust all the myths, to break down what they got wrong about. And I really don't feel like doing that. Not because, oh, it's too much work, but because I don't want to dissuade these two people from making more videos. I don't want the community I don't want the inverse of what's been happening. They're getting love bombed. People are saying this is the greatest video ever. I don't want the inverse to happen. I don't want people to go and start hating on them. I don't want anybody who would be too invested in the franchise and the story to suddenly see them as targets, right? That's the last thing I want. That's why I end all my videos saying we need to be respectful. And so I guess part of the reason that I don't want to react to the video and break down why it's wrong is because they didn't necessarily put out the video saying, this is right, I believe this 100%, even though the video is like, oh, we solved it for real, oh my god. That's just clickbait. Doesn't mean they necessarily believe it 100%. There's a lot of things in my long video that I don't believe 100%. So yeah, I don't feel like knocking them down a peg is necessarily the correct response to their video, even though I really do not believe their video and think that anybody who truly looks at the franchise and has played the games themselves and reads the books themselves would believe the video. So that is my opinion on Cassidy being the crying child's name. It's not. It is very clearly not. Why and when did the fanbase conclude Cece's death was a Springlock accident? We can't theorize if technical terms no longer have any meaning, and I'd like you to touch on that. That's kind of something that people have been claiming for a very long time, which is that the Springlock, the multiple simultaneous Springlock failure that was discussed in FNAF 3 is the bite that killed Cece. It doesn't necessarily matter if it is or not. I think that we're so long past FNAF 3 that solving, like, who that, multiple simultaneous Springlock failure was is something that is solvable just by looking at the evidence. I think that when FNAF 3 came out, that was merely a story beat to tell you, this can hurt people can die, that's why they got discontinued, right? I don't think that the person who got Springlocked is Chica Bully, right? I don't think it's going to come back and be important. This is just a outcome of the fan base taking some mystery that we don't have, who got Springlocked, and applying it to some other mystery, and being like, well, maybe these are the same thing, because every single piece of evidence needs to tie into the timeline and be super important, which is just not true, not the case. I think my camera's messed up. Give me 1 second. Something about the resolution of my camera was wrong, but I just fixed it. No, so spring lock failure is when the locks that hold the endoskeleton out of the suit loosen due to moisture or rust or age or whatever, and then they close, and then the endoskeleton gets crushed into the person, and like they get stabbed and they get crushed. Cece being placed into the opening and closing jaw of the Fredbear animatronic, who is singing, right? So his lip movements are controlled by a computer to mimic the song that's being sung or the dialogue that's being said. His head being put in there, and then the program telling him to close his mouth, and that being enough power and force to crush his skull, is not a Springlock incident. It's not a Springlock failure. There's not a Springlock holding his jaw open. His jaw's open because that's how animatronics work. So yes, you are correct. Not a Springlock accident. I think that the reason that people conflate these two things is because they want an answer as to what the Springlock failure in FNAF 3 was. Vis-a-vis your 9-hour video, how did CC imprint on Fredbear, and how did the MCI kids manifest in the Springlock scenes, if all the paranormal stuff seems to rely on high-tech, I don't know what that acronym stands for, lore. I think that the way that we understand like how an object can become haunted in the series is not well understood. Even at the time that the Silver Eyes trilogy was coming out, we were sort of told that Remnant is haunted metal. And yet the way that Charlie came to life was Henry's agony manifesting in this doll he had. Agony didn't exist as like a term that had a name until the Fazbear Fright novels. So it's unclear at what point Scott had decided how things work and at what point we were supposed to understand how things work. I think that CC printed on Fredbear, because I just think that that's a thing that can happen. I think that the kids can manifest themselves as ghosts the way that they do in the novels and the movies, where they're, ghosts walking around outside of their suits. And it's unclear if they can, like, pick up objects and, like, move them, or if they're just projecting their visage to, like, onlookers, right? So it's unclear if the ghosts could have physically harmed William, or if the ghosts that he saw in the FNAF 3 scenes where he got Springlocked were just things that he saw and that scared him. Also, maybe I'm missing something, but how TF does the puppet move? Even if it's flying on strings, how does it go outside to grab Charlie? Even when the others are possessed, they seem to be constrained by what's physically possible for the animatronics. If you look at FNAF 2 and you see the puppet, standing up like in FNAF 3 and walking through the restaurant, or in FNAF 2 flying, Phone Guy even says it can go anywhere. What is the real world technology that allows this to happen? It doesn't exist. It's nonsense, but it's nothing to do with the puppet being possessed. clearly, if you look at the security puppet minigame, it can just fly. And that doesn't mean that it's a drone. It doesn't mean that there's like little propellers. It doesn't mean that it's made of helium. The puppet can just fly before it's possessed. It just can. That's just a technology that exists in this world that we have to, like, get over. Question, why does everyone think FNAF 4's story is so complicated? Like, yeah, in Sister Location and some of the books that came afterwards, it became this whole testing chamber thing. But even when it came out, people were saying it doesn't make any sense. But I always thought it was really simple, actually. Am I missing something? Was it just dream theory? I just wanted your opinion on it. FNAF 4 was confusing when it came out because the story being told didn't fit any other events that we had previously been told about in the first 3 games. The first 3 games are centered on this nighttime gameplay. You're the security guard, stuff's going on. Oh my god, there's animatronics coming after me in the first one. Oh my god. In the second one, at the end of the game, you find out that it's the prelude to the Bite of 87. And then the third game is the final boss battle against the main enemy, who is Purple Guy. When FNAF 4 comes out, and we learn about something that is not the MCI incident, is not the Bite of 87, is not, like, the origin story for Purple Guy, because he's just kind of in it for 1 second, you're sort of looking at these characters, and you know that it's important. You know, Scott said 4 games, 1 story. You're supposed to note what's going on. You're like, it's supposed to make sense. But in FNAF 4, it's not telling the story of something that had been hinted in the past. We're not seeing the MCI happen. We're not seeing the Bite of 87 happen. So who are these characters? What's going on? My belief is that we were supposed to figure out that Foxy Bro is Mike Schmidt. That is what's going on. This is the origin story of Mike Schmidt. This is what caused him to go back to Freddy's over and over. This now is like confirming that the night security guard of FNAF 3 is Mike Schmidt, who's doing his final battle with Springtrap. I don't know if it was intended at the time that Purple Guy was their father, but I 100% think the solution to FNAF 4 is that Foxy Bro is Mike Schmidt. Nobody thought of that until Sister Location just blatantly told you that that was the case. And I've said before that I think that it's not that it was a retcon in Sister Location, it's that Sister Location made it so obvious that people thought it was a retcon. I think Scott saw what happened with FNAF 4 and was like, they missed the story I was trying to tell. I better just, like, tell them point blank, Father, it's me, Michael, right? That's literally just the most direct thing you can do. This is Mike Schmidt, Purple Guy's his father. It just, you know, he is watching Cece, therefore, you know, Cece at the time we thought, now we think it's Mike, who's a bedroom we're seeing in FNAF 4. So Sister Location just spells out the secret, and so I think that people thought that was a retcon. But yeah, when FNAF 4 came out, the story was that Foxy Bro was Mike Schmidt, but nobody solved it. You know, as uncool as it is to focus on Scott being Christian, we are discussing tons of different interpretations, what is literal versus figurative, using different books to make one narrative, with our biggest concern being zealots who only believe one interpretation. FNAF is very much like Bible studies. So this means that we need to come up with different denominations and different names. People who think that Cassidy is the crying child, people who think that it's all a video game, people who believe in dream theory. These all gotta be different denominations. People who believe the crying child's name is Evan can be evangelicals. I'm laughing because this is so stupid. I'm not funny. How do you decide which information in the games isn't relevant to the overall story? Like how the details of driving on the left side of the road, or there not being glass on the ground, didn't say anything about Midnight Motorist, or how there are plenty of jokes in the early games that probably don't have deep lore implications, reasons for termination in FNAF 1 and 2, Fazbear Frights unknowingly discovering the corpse, etc. So that's references to things that I've specifically said, where I was overall making the point in Midnight Motorist that when you're looking through the games for evidence, there are going to be some things that are just there for gameplay. There are going to be some things that are just there for jokes or for Easter eggs and self-referential humor. There's going to be some things that are just a limitation of the medium, right? Like in Midnight Motorist, there's no glass on the outside of the house, so people use that to think that that means that the window was broken into, because the glass is on the inside. And my opinion is that it doesn't actually tell us either way, whether the glass is on the inside or the outside, because Scott might just have not wanted to display the glass in 8-bit in the minigame. Like, he may have just literally not thought about it. He might have just said, oh, the window's broken, that indicates the window's broken. He might not have thought to put glass on the outside, even if the window was intentionally broken out of. In Midnight Motorist, not in Later That Night, but in Midnight Motorist, when you're driving down the road, you're driving on the left side of the road. Is that supposed to indicate that you're in the United Kingdom? Or is that just how video games work, where you go from the left side of the... I don't know which way is left. Where you go from the left side of the screen to the right side of the screen. that's just how video games work. So maybe that's just how Midnight Motorist works. And when you're looking at theories, there are some things you have to ignore, because not everything is a lore drop. What you personally determine to be an Easter egg, a gameplay necessary element, a piece of lore, is entirely up to your own interpretation and your own threshold for what you think is reasonable, right? People ask me, how is it that the people who found the Springlock animatronic suit didn't notice the body inside of it? You know, is that a lore drop? Does that mean that the people who were in charge of Fazbear Fright are, like, in on it? You know, what do they know? And I said that I think it's just a joke about how unattentive these corporate people are. And this guy's now asking, how do you come to that conclusion? And the fact is that I just think that it makes more sense that way. So there is no hard and fast reason. There's no equation. There's no, like, this is right, this is wrong. It's just down to your personal interpretation, what makes most sense to you. In the FNAF 6 speech, Henry implies Mike was not intended to be the owner of the pizza place. Are there any other important characters he could be alluding to? I don't think so. I think that when Henry says, you know, you found a job listing, somehow, not meant for you, I think he just meant that when he was putting together the FNAF 6 pizzeria simulator place, he did not intend Mike to be the one to become the manager of the building. He just needed a volunteer. He just needed somebody to take the job. That wasn't him. That wasn't Henry. And that's basically saying from Scott, from the writer's perspective, like, Henry's master plan was not to get Mike there. Mike's desire to follow anything Freddy's related is what led him there. So no, I do not think that Henry was trying to grab someone else specifically. I think it's overtly saying this was not meant for anyone in particular. That's why I had a way out planned for you. But you are here, this is kind of serendipitous. Wow, that's great. I know you've said you're not going to touch the modern era of FNAF until it's over and you can make a cohesive story out of them, but I'm just curious what you think about the games. Do you like them? Do you think Steel Wool has done a good job with the series so far? So the only game that I've played that is in the Steel Wool era is the beginning of Security Breach. I got to a little past the daycare segment, and it's not that I didn't like it, it was just so different from typical FNAF gameplay, and it played, as most people say, like a real and normal video game, a normal, like, adventure video game. And if you judge it by that standard, if you compare it to other real video games, it is subpar, just from, like, a gameplay perspective, and it's hard to judge it against the other older Click Team FNAF games because it's so different. I've been told that the Help Wanted games are phenomenal. I do not have a VR headset, and I don't want to play them in flat mode. I want to play them in VR, so I will be playing those when I get a VR headset. But I will be tearing those games apart, looking for lore, especially in Security Breach. So I think that the fact that the community likes their games indicates that they are doing a good job. What's up with the locations in the FNAF 3 secrets, the tree, the giant puppet, etc.? I think that those are abstract representations of things that, like, the either the spirits who are messing with the games or the Scott wants us to see, right? Why is there a giant puppet? Maybe it's because the puppet's shadow is still being cast long over the events that have happened since then. Why is there this weird, like, giant crying child? Maybe it's because that segment of the games is being impacted by the death of that child, right? Maybe that's indicating that the reason that this game that we're playing, this Balloon Boys Air Adventure, this Mangle's Quest, is different than the real arcade machine, is because there is a dead child spirit, right? Maybe that's the abstract representation of the fact that there is remnant in the games. Because it's weird, that's the answer. Was Scott specifically trying to say something we're supposed to discover, or is it just there to be creepy? It's both. It's all of the above. It's whatever you want it to be. This might be stupid and or unoriginal, but is it possible that Midnight Motorist is about Jeremy? Okay, I'm immediately interested. Jeremy, the FNAF 2 security guard. Something that's always bothered me is that we have an answer to why Mike keeps coming back, but we don't have one for Jeremy. That is true. That's something I skimmed over in my timeline because I'm like, oh, Mike coming back is a story beat that we're going to learn about later. And then I just don't address the fact that Jeremy comes back because it's confusing and there is no answer. Although, one thing I will say, I was going to make a video about this and then decided against it. The stupid, the Talbert files, whatever they were called, the fake, like, FNAF leak of an earlier copy of one of the encyclopedia books that ended up just being a complete fan creation that was not true. It stated that the characters of Fritz and Jeremy, the MCI victims who have those names, are the children of the guards, Fritz and Jeremy, which would explain why they're in FNAF 2. It would argue that Fritz, the security guard in Night 7 of FNAF 2, is not Mike, but that he is the father of an MCI victim, which is why he's a security guard, which is also why Jeremy, the FNAF 2 night security guard, is there, because his child was in the MCI. Obviously not canon, not true, that entire leak was fake, but that's not a fan theory I'd heard before, so I do like that, and that is something I'd like to investigate further. What if Jeremy is Mustard Man, and his son is an MCI kid, specifically Jeremy? That could explain the Juniors thing. The bar is called Juniors. Maybe that's supposed to be a hint from Scott that his son is Jeremy Jr. Huh, I really like that. Okay. I might have to think about this when I'm not on camera. Jeremy again, would start his arc as an alcoholic deadbeat father, and once he's discovered his kid is missing, he would take the job at Freddy's to try to figure out what happened. Once he does figure it out, William programs one of the animatronics to kill him, which leads to the bite of 87, or that could just be a thing that happens, right? I don't have a ton of evidence for this, but FNAF 2 seems to have an emphasis on Bonnie, Toy Bonnie specifically, and Shadow Bonnie, who's based on Toy Bonnie. At the time, I think Scott was trying to hint at Springtrap, but it could have changed. Jeremy, the MCI victim, probably possesses Bonnie because of the gravestone and the heads in FNAF 3 alignments. That is, yeah. If you align the heads of the animatronics in FNAF 3 in the ending with the gravestones in FNAF 6, then Chica lines up. The other ones, because Chica's the only girl, so we're just kind of assuming that Susie is Chica. The other heads, obviously, it doesn't really matter which one's Jeremy, which one's Gabriel. But yes, that does mean that Bonnie would line up with Jeremy Jr. in this case. Shadow Bonnie and Toy Bonnie could be Jeremy's It's Me. I don't know if Toy Bonnie would be. One of the mini games in FNAF 2 shows William with an orange badge that is really similar to Mustard Man's color. It's a security guard badge. What if Scott made him mustard to show that Jeremy is William in reverse through colors? William is purple with hints of orange in FNAF 2. Also, William's associated with orange because Springtrap is like an orangey color, right? Like he has text in FNAF 6 that is orange, and my argument is that orange is his Bonnie voice, his hey, follow me, Susie voice, whereas purple is his normal speaking voice. William is purple with hints of orange in FNAF 2. Mustard Man is mustard with hints of purple, his car. William started out as a grieving father with good intentions but turned evil, and Jeremy was a horrible father but tried to redeem himself with FNAF 2. In this way, he's kind of similar to Michael. I'm not sure if any game after UCN has conflicting evidence, as I'm not as familiar with those games, but I think it would be cool for Jeremy to have a deep story like Mike, William, and Henry. Love your videos and all the work you put in. Wow, I love that. I love that so much. I think that the community currently thinks that Jeremy is Bonnie Bully, and that he's Cassie's father from Ruin. But if we're assuming that the runaway is an MCI victim, that means that Midnight Motorist takes place in 1985. So if Cassie is, let's say, absolute oldest 14 in Ruin, which takes place in the mid-2020s, then she would have been born in, like, 2010. And for Jeremy to already be a father of, let's say, a 10-year-old in, like, 1985, he would be really, really old to be having a kid. So I'm not sure that this would mean that Jeremy is allowed to be the same Jeremy as in the theory that he's Cassie's father. But it's possible, and I do like this, right? This is one of those examples where, like, Addy Day 1361, please make a YouTube video about this. I would love to see this more thought out. I would love to see the evidence. I would love to see depictions of Midnight Motorist with, like, a voiceover saying this is what's happening in this scene. This is great. I'm going to be thinking about this all day now. What are your thoughts on the Shatter Victim theory, or the idea that Crying Child's soul got split up across the 5 FNAF 1 animatronics plus the puppet in some versions? Shatter Victim is a very interesting theory. I think that it gets very close to what Scott's intention was, especially with FNAF World. It's basically what this person says, which is that when Cece was bitten, his essence, his remnant, his soul, his hauntness, his whatever, is split among the animatronics, and so only when they're, like, all combined at the end, which would happen either in FNAF 6 with the fire, right? That must make sense. Or maybe in Happiest Day, if you think Happiest Day takes place in FNAF 3. That's why he's allowed to move on, because now all of his pieces are together. The problem with it as a theory is that there are so many different variations of it that to say, do you believe in Shatter Victim theory? What version, right? Is a puppet involved? It's literally like there's 7 different versions of what Shatter Victim is, that for me to say, yes, I believe it, or no, I don't believe it, doesn't really get at the real question. Let's see what they say. I think it perfectly explains why the MCI spirits seem to be trapped inside their own individual memories of Crying Child in FNAF 3, with Golden Freddy / Cassidy being trapped inside Bite Victim's worst memory, the day of the bite. If we're saying that Stage 01, which is the FNAF 3 minigame that happens when you're playing as Fredbear, if we're saying that that's Cassidy's, memory, that that minigame is something that Cassidy is stuck in, are we also saying that, Toy Chica, that, her video game, are we saying that Susie is in that? Because then we'd have to answer, who's in Mangle? And some people think that Mangle is, Susie's dog, right? So, is Susie in the Toy Chica game and Mangle's quest? Who is Balloon Boy? So I'm not sure if that really lines up one-to-one with what I think this person's getting at. It also explains a number of things, such as what you're broken means. So that's kind of going back to what I've said a couple times about how, FNAF theorists will be we need to put all the pieces together in a way that is satisfying. I think that you're broken is just an indication of the fact that William sees people as machines. So there are other explanations about what you're broken means, right? Also, what's up with the Fredbear plush? William noticed something was up with the Crying Child, something was paranormal about him, so he spied on him using the plush. It's worth noting that Crying Child was still alive when William called him broken. Parts of Cece's soul could have been shedding for weeks from excessive emotion, specifically fear. That's how, agony works, right? Like how a piece of Henry's soul broke off of Henry and possessed the Ella doll in the novels. Yeah, that's how, again, that agony is how, Charlie was born in the novels. Okay, so Cece, who's, in the hospital dying but not dead yet, his agony of dying is what possesses the Fredbear plush. What's really interesting about that is that Henry's agony allows the Ella doll to become Charlie, but in this theory, in most people's theories, Cece's agony allows the Fredbear plush to become Cece. Could Cece's agony make the Fredbear plush into William? Is that a thing that could happen? Okay, that's another thing I'm gonna have to think about, right? Can an agony manifestation be about someone who's alive? Would Cece's agony have manifested himself as his father? I think that's very possible. And so therefore, is the Fredbear plush possessed by agony that makes it like a twin of William? I came up with that on the spot. I'm gonna have to think about that. That's not what this person's saying, but that is, that's an interesting thing, right? That's something where what happens in the games and what happens in the book is not a one-to-one on how things work, right? When people say, illusion discs don't exist in the games, but there's an equivalent to them. That's kind of the same concept. Wow, okay. I think it also connects back to your discussion in the Mrs. Afton video of what put back together really means. I think that put back together means that you sort of gain control over your animatronic. According to Mike, the creation of Ennard put Elizabeth back together. Yes, because at the end of the game, he says, I put her back together just like you asked me to. Baby experienced the scooper, so it is extremely likely that some of her remnant was removed and ended up inside the Fun Times. So remember, the scooper gives remnant to the animatronics. It's unclear if it harvests from them. Elizabeth's spirit was shattered across the Fun Times and needed brought together. That's true. If Ennard is her put back together, that's true. This works with Molten MCI as well, which also means that Ennard is not only the MCI and put together Elizabeth, but also Crying Child, meaning that every important Afton family member had an animatronic in Pizzeria Simulator. Unless, if Cece is Golden Freddy, there's no evidence that Golden Freddy is in Pizzeria Simulator. There is a theory that the Rockstar animatronics were somehow a manifestation of Cece or Cassidy or something like that, right? Henry had the Golden Freddy suit and he put it into the Rockstars. But great, love this. Again, love to see a video on this. I don't think there's any true evidence in the game that confirms 100% that Golden Freddy is somewhere in the FNAF 6 location. WTF are the sister locations, animatronics, are they possessed? Yes, it's Molten MCI. There's a lot of people who don't believe in Molten MCI. I've seen them in the comments on my videos. Sour Squawks does not believe it, but I actually didn't believe it at first. There's a whole section of my video where I sort of try to describe Henry's closing monologue in FNAF 6 in a certain way, because at the time I wrote that section, I didn't believe in Molten MCI. And then when I actually read The Fourth Closet, which was one of the last things I did when I was writing my script, I was like, oh, Molten MCI isn't a theory. Molten MCI is one of the clearest confirmations of something happening in the series that we have. In The Fourth Closet, Molten MCI happened. It just does. Like that, it just says the Funtime animatronics are William removing Remnant from the original animatronics and possessing them, and allowing them to be animated. The Biddy Babs, the mini arenas, those have like a little bit of Remnant in them, and then Ballora, Funtime Foxy, etc., those have more Remnant in them. That is just what the book says. That is just true. And the books were planned out at least by the time of Sister Location. Of all the theories I believe, Molten MCI is not one I think that can be questioned. It is 99% canon. It is the closest thing there is to something being confirmed in the series. So the answer is Molten MCI. If you don't know Molten MCI, I'm sure there's multiple videos explaining it, or you can just read The Fourth Closet. I really want to know what you think Candy Cadet is. What is his deal? Why is he like that? Is he haunted? I think he is very clearly haunted. Whether he is haunted in the same way that Elizabeth is, whether he's put together, or whether he is just sort of guided by some amount of remnant, which allows him to like see into the ghost dimension. I definitely think he's haunted, and I think that he is potentially haunted by either Charlie or Cassidy. I think it's almost more likely that it's Cassidy, because one of the stories he told was about Charlie's failure in bringing all the animatronics like to safety, to life. So as a storyteller, right, it sort of fits the role that Cassidy was in those early games. Cassidy was able to view these memories and these true events through the lens of these mini games, these these zoomed out representations, these abstract representations. So for her to then be able to sort of pass on this knowledge in the real world through this robot, I think is thematically appropriate. With that said, I don't think that Cassidy controls Candy Cadet, right? Like, I don't think that he's a put-together animatronic. Definitely possessed. There's really no other way that he makes sense. I'm going to have to cut these here. There's going to be now a part 2 to this, just because the filming went on for so long. So be sure to be nice to each other in the comments. Consider supporting the creators you most admire. Never lose sight of the things that are most important to you, and remember that FREDDY stands for friendly, respectful engagement, discussion, and discourse yields success. I do have a Patreon linked in the description. Your support would help a lot. You can also do super chats on the channel. Those are also very helpful. I'm trying to quit my day job, and this would allow me to put out videos like this every week, and also make my other videos much quicker. I do have another channel. It's called GiBi's Good Idea, Bad Idea. It's kind of barren right now, but I am working on a lot of videos to post over there. I have a lot of ideas, and a lot of videos I want to make in my Absurds series, and I have a podcast called Slappindippity, also linked in the description below. Besides that, I just hope the rest of you guys have a great day.